and then I'm going to start sharing again. All right, now we're recording and sharing my screen now. All right, let's work through some example problems from chapter 8. So here, you should be able to see my screen. Here are the problems that I want to work through today. I don't know if we'll get through all of them. The solutions to these problems are on Blackboard already. And then these problems down here were the ones that the TAs would work in discussion section, but obviously we're not doing that. So you could work these on your own and then ask me and I can give you the solutions to see if you're doing them right. But I mean, these problems are essentially just like the problems that we're going to work. All right. So let's go to chapter 8, end of chapter stuff, starting with the exercises. And the first one on that list was 8.1a. So let's work 8.1a. Trying to get my pen out of my laptop. So it says, Greg Company uses the allowance method to record its expected credit losses. It estimates credit losses at 3% of credit sales. Credit sales were $900,000 during the year. On December 31st, the accounts receivable balance was $150,000, and the allowance for doubtful accounts had a credit balance of $12,000 before any adjustment. So we need to A, prepare the adjusting entry to record the credit losses for the year, or the estimated credit losses for the year. And then B, show how accounts receivable and the allowance for doubtful accounts will appear on the December 31st balance sheet. So we can, let's do exercise 8.1a here. We can do a T account for accounts receivable. You don't have to, but it just helps to see things. So accounts receivable at the end of December, the balance is $150,000. Debit balance, right? Because it's an asset. And then the allowance for doubtful accounts, T account, at the end of December has a credit balance of $12,200 before adjustment. So this is the balance 12/31 before adjustment. Credit sales during the year were $900,000 right here. And they estimate that the credit losses will be 3% of credit sales. So they're using the percent of sales approach to the allowance method. So part A, what's the adjusting entry? We need to figure out what's 3% of 900,000. The adjusting entry in part A, the debit will be debit bad debt expense. Bad debt expense. And the credit will be to allowance for doubtful accounts. And the number is the 3% of 900,000. 900,000 were all those sales dollars this year that we did on credit. And we expect not to be able to collect 3% of that. So we need to do 0.03 times the 900,000. And that would be, what's 3% of 100,000 is 3,000. And so 3,000 times 9. So 3% of 900,000 is 27,000. So $27,000. A little star This is how STAR was calculated. So that's part A. There's the journal entry for to estimate the credit losses for the year. And so we can go ahead and put the 27,000 in the allowance account right here. And so at the end of the year, after the adjustment, our 12/31 balance in the allowance for doubtful accounts is what, 39,200? Let me see if I have any, if anyone's asking any questions. Okay, no questions. Just making sure. So the part B was show how accounts receivable and the allowance for doubtful accounts will appear on the December 31st balance sheet. So on the December 31st balance sheet, we would list our accounts receivable and its balance, which is $150,000. We'll put it over here a little bit to the right. And then we would write less the balance in the contra account, right? These two accounts are linked to each other. The allowance account is a contra account to accounts receivable. So we need to subtract the balance in the allowance account. So less the balance in the allowance for doubtful accounts account. So less the 39,200. Usually you would put parentheses around a number that you're going to subtract. But we don't need a parentheses here because we wrote the word less, right? So it's obvious what we're doing. We're subtracting. If you write the word less, there's no need for parentheses. It's redundant. And then accounts receivable minus the balance in the allowance account, that's called the net accounts receivable. So 150 minus 39,200, what's that? 150 minus 40 would be 110, but we're not subtracting 40, we're only subtracting 39,200. So it's 110,800, I believe. Hopefully I did that math right in my head. So this right here is the balance sheet presentation for accounts receivable and the allowance for doubtful accounts. This is how they would appear. Right here is how they would appear on the 12/31 balance sheet. Any questions on this problem? I'm looking at the chat now to see if there's anything. Nothing? All right, let's work the next one. Let's see the list here. So the next one is 8.7a. Oh, someone has a question. Janelle says, hold on, let me see. Janelle has a question. Professor, have you posted the remaining solutions to the practice exam 2 on Blackboard? Yes, I have. The practice exam 2 answer key is completely filled out now. There are 20 questions on practice exam 2, and there are 20 solutions on the answer key, a solution for each question. So yes. You're welcome. All right, let's continue. How to minimize this chat? It's kind of in my way here. Let's see. Pardon me, I'm trying to figure out the chat right now. There, all right. All right, so we're doing 8.7a is the next one. Jumping ahead here. Here we go. There's 87A. So this question's testing the accounts receivable turnover ratio and the average collection period ratio, which we learned on Tuesday at the end of lecture, towards the end of lecture. So the Outback Corporation disclosed the following financial information in millions of dollars in its recent annual report. Net sales revenue for 2018 and 2019 is given, and then they give you the beginning and the ending balance in accounts receivable. And they write the word net here. Net of what? Net of the allowance for doubtful accounts, right? So they're giving you the beginning net account receivable and the ending net account receivable for each year of 2018, 2019. So part A, we have to calculate the accounts receivable turnover ratio for both years. What is the accounts receivable turnover ratio in general? Question. Someone has a question. Let's see. What's the question? Hey guys, I'm sorry. I had to join a few minutes late. Have we talked about how we will take the test? I will answer that question at the end of lecture. So at the end of lecture, please ask that again, and I will go over that. If you have questions about the problems we're working, we can ask those now, and then save questions about exam or review session tomorrow for the end, to the end of the lecture. Accounts receivable turnover. We have to calculate it for 2018 and 2019. So we're doing part A. So accounts receivable turnover is equal to net sales revenue divided by the average accounts receivable. So if we want to calculate the account receivable turnover for 2018, we need the net sales revenue in 2018, which is $72,500 times 1 million, but we can just keep it in. All the numbers are expressed in millions, so the ratio will be consistent if we just keep it like this. So 72,500, and then we want to divide by the, what does it say here? The average accounts receivable. What's the average accounts receivable for 2018? It's the average of the beginning balance and the ending balance. So we just need to add those two numbers up and divide by 2. So 3896 plus 4100 divided by 2 is the average. 3896 plus 4200 divided by 2. So this right here is the average accounts receivable. So for 2018, we'll get, I don't have a calculator on me. Probably should have done that. Actually, I do have a calculator. Give me a second here. $72,500 divided by the average of 3896 and 4200 is, so the answer is not in dollars because we have dollars divided by dollars. It's just a number. So it's 17.910079 and so forth. So 17.91, this means that during 2018, the Outback Corporation turned over their accounts receivable approximately 18 times that year. Does someone have a question? I see someone type something in the chat, but I don't understand. They just typed a character. Anyway, moving on. So there's the AR turnover for 2018. AR turnover for 2019 is following the same procedure. Oh, 4,100, not 4,200. Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, you're right. I took the wrong number. I put 4,200 instead of 4,100. My bad. Let's go correct it. Thank you, Nathan. 4,100. And that changes the final answer. So let's go back, correct it. $18.13. There we go. Thanks, Nathan. You're on top of things. I appreciate it. AR turnover 2019, we're going to take the net sales revenue in 2019 and divide it by the average of, beginning and ending accounts receivable for 2019. 83,750 divided by the average of 4,100 and 35.96. 4,100 is 35.96. Divide by 2. This will be in dollars, of course. So we have dollars divided by dollars. Dollars cancels, and we just get a number. 83,750 divided by the average of 4,100, 35.96 is 21.76 if you round to 2 decimal places. So in 2018, they turned their accounts receivable over about 18 times, which means they sold stuff on account and then collected those accounts in cash 18 times. And in 2019, they did it 22 times. That doesn't mean they made 22 sales to 22 different people. Not that. I mean, their total accounts receivable, which includes accounts receivable for many different people, they turned it over. They collected it 22 times in 2019, 18 times in 2018. This is an estimate. Part B, calculate the average collection period for both years. So the formula in general for average collection period is, well, the average collection period. So for example, in 2018, 18 times during the year, they turned over their accounts receivable. So the question is, well, how many days on average does it take them to turn over their accounts receivable? So we just take the number of days in a year. And we divide that by the number of times they turned over their accounts receivable that year. And that gives us, on average, how many days it takes them to turn over their accounts receivable, to collect their accounts receivable in cash. So 355 divided by 18.13. On average, it takes them about, I'm just going to round to the nearest day, 20 days per time in 2018. And in 2019, it takes them on average, if you round up, 17 days, 16.77. Every time they turn over their accounts receivable, it takes them 17 days. Part C, is the company's accounts receivable management improving or deteriorating? I would say it's improving. In 2019, they turned over their accounts receivable 3 more times, or approximately 4 more times than they did in 2018, which means that since 2019 and 2018 both have 365 days, so the numerator stays fixed, the denominator is getting bigger, which means in 2019, it takes them, 3 days less than it does in 2018 to turn over their accounts receivable. They're collecting their accounts receivable better. So their accounts receivable management is getting better. So I would say the answer to the question is yes, because the average collection period is getting smaller. When the average collection period gets smaller, that means that they're collecting their accounts receivable more often, which is better for the company. Any questions with exercise 8.7a? So you see, I remember last time in lecture, a student asked, will you be given average accounts receivable or will you have to calculate it? Sometimes you'll be given it, I'll just actually give you the number. And other times, like in this question, you had to calculate it. On the exam, I will have a Zoom session open that you can click onto. You can leave the exam and go into a Zoom session, or you can click on a new tab. Your internet might not support doing both at the same time, so make sure it does. And if you have a question on one of the exam questions, you can pop it in the Zoom session and I'll just be in there the whole time during the whole time frame, and you can ask me. So this would be an example of a question. Like on the exam, you could ask something like, how do we, well, I don't know if I could answer that one, but like on this one, you could ask, you didn't give us average accounts receivable. How am I supposed to do the question? And I would say, I didn't give it to you because you're supposed to calculate it. That's what I would say if you ask that on the exam. Anyway, let's do the next one. Let's see, what's the next one? 9A. Let's do 9A. Where'd 9A go? I guess it was on the previous. Here we go. Someone typed something in the chat. Again, it's a character, which I don't understand. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's an accident. Okay, no problem. No problem at all. Dang it, this stupid chat is like driving me crazy. I'm trying to like minimize it and get it out of my way. I don't know if you guys can see as I'm sharing my screen, if you can see the actual chat, because it's on my screen, I'm moving it around. But the settings in Zoom might be to where you can't see me moving the chat around, but you can see everything else on my screen. Hopefully that's the case, so you don't see all the problems I'm having. All right. Miller Incorporated analyzed its accounts receivable balances at December 31st and arrived at the aged balances listed below, along with the percentage that is estimated to be uncollectible. So in this problem, you're going to be estimating the credit losses using not the percent of sales approach like we did in the first one, but using the aging schedule approach. So this is an aging schedule that you're looking at right here, right here. So their account receivable balance at the end of the year, 12/31, the balance in accounts receivable is this number right here. Oh, they said there's a small caret to the left of the heading that says Zoom group chat. If you click on that, you can close the chat. Yeah, I know I can close it, but then if I close it, if I get a question, I won't necessarily know I've gotten it. Thank you though for trying to help. I'm just going to kind of keep the chat over here to the side. Thank you though for trying to help. I'm probably messing up the technology, but I'm doing the best I can. All right, so the balance in accounts receivable at the end of the year, 264,000. 180,000 of that is between 0 and 30 days past due. 40,000 of that, well, let me think. All right, so this isn't necessarily the total accounts receivable balance at the end of the year. This is the part of the total balance that is past due, right? So the total balance might be 400,000. And this is the amount of 400,000 that's past due. And the rest of the 400,000, it's due, but it's not past due. Usually a company will give a customer between 30 and 60 days to pay off an account. And then after the 60 days or after the 30 days, depending on the company's policy, the account is past due. And so this just represents, of the total accounts receivable due to the company, this 264,000 is the amount of that is past due. That's over 30 days or over 60 days past due. And then of that amount, the company has broken down and has said 180,000 is between 0 and 30 days past due. 40,000 of the 264,000 that's past due is between 31 and 60 days past due, and so forth. And for each of these amounts, they've estimated a probability of non-collection. So the $180,000 of accounts receivable that is between 0 and 30 days past due, they estimate not to be able to collect this 1%. Or another way to interpret it is 1% of this they expect to not be able to collect, and so forth. And as you can imagine, the accounts receivable, the $8,000 that's over 180 days past due, right? That's over 6 months past due. They expect to not be able to collect 25% of that. So the probability of non-collection goes up. So what we need to do is essentially make a third column to this table, and that third column is the expected amount that we won't be able to collect. And it's just the product of the balance column and the probability column. So if we multiply these two columns together, we get the third column. Let's do that. This is the third column of the table. So the 0 to 30 days past due, we have 0.01 times 180,000. Or what is that, 1,800? I believe that's right. Between the 31 to 60 days past due, we have 0.04 times 40,000. So we expect not to be able to collect 4% of 40,000. 4% of 1,000 is $40. So 4% of 40,000 is 40 times 40, which I guess is 1,600. Yeah. And then for the 61 to 90 days past due, we have 5% of 22,000 or 1,100. And for the 91 to 180 days past due, we have, oh, whoops, this is 61, oh, sorry. 61 to 120 is 22,000, sorry. 61 days past due to 120 days past due. And the next category is 121, I'm sorry, yeah, 121 to 180 and then over 180. Fine, whatever. Just getting the categories right. So the 121 to 180 is 14,000 and 12% of that is expected not to be able to be collected. So 0.12 times 14,000, 1,680. And finally, the 8,000 that's over 6 months past due, 25% of that we expect not to be able to collect. 25% of 8,000, the expected amount not to be able to collect is 2,000, right? And so when we add all this up, we get our total. So 1,800 plus the 1,600 plus the 1,100 plus the 1,680 plus the 2,000, 8,180. So this number right here is what the balance in the allowance for doubtful accounts should be at the end of the year. Because this represents, of our total accounts receivable, this amount is what we expect not to be able to collect. And that's the definition of allowance for doubtful accounts. So the balance at the end of the year in allowance for doubtful accounts should be this number. So that's what you get on the aging schedule, is the ending balance in allowance for doubtful accounts. It says here, the balance in the allowance for doubtful accounts on December 31st, before any adjustment, is 1,150. So this is the 12/31 balance in the account before adjustment. After adjustment, the balance needs to be 8,180. And so the adjustment, or the bad debt expense for this year, is the plug. This is the bad debt expense. It's the adjusting entry. This is how you get bad debt expense using the aging schedule. You get the total amount uncollectible from the aging schedule. That's the ending balance in the allowance account. And then you have to figure out the plug in the account to make the account make sense. And so 1,150 plus X has to equal 8,180. So the adjustment X is 8,180 minus 1,150, or it looks to be $7,030. That's the adjustment that needs to be made. We need to credit the allowance account for $7,030. We need to debit bad debt expense for $7,030. So the question here in part A is prepare the adjusting entry for the estimated credit losses on December 31st. And the adjusting entry is, it's always debit bad debt expense, credit the allowance for doubtful accounts. It's just the amount differs between if you use the percentage of sales approach versus if you use the aging schedule approach. The aging schedule approach, in this particular problem, this would be the journal entry for this amount. Where did this amount come from? It came from us doing these steps up here. So on the exam, I mean, you won't have time to write this down. I mean, I never asked you to write any of this down, right? You would just have to, in your scratch paper, you know, get this number, get this number, get this number, and you just add them up. Just get this number. You don't have to write a table. I mean, don't do that. That's going to take forever. If that's how it helps you think through it, then do it, but it's going to take a while. I would just do this calculation on your calculator, then add this one and so forth. Just get this number. That's the number we need. All right, what does it say for part B? Prepare the journal entry to write off the Lions Company's account on April 10th of the following year in the amount of $575. So Miller has a customer, Lions Company, and they decided on April 10th of the following year that they're for sure not going to be able to collect on that account receivable. Lions Company is never going to pay Miller. Miller finds that out for whatever reason. Maybe Lions Company went bankrupt for whatever reason. So what's the journal entry that Miller has to do to write off Lions account? Well, on April 10th of the following year, whenever they find that the account is going to be uncollectible, when you write off an account, you get rid of the allowance for that account by debiting the allowance for doubtful accounts, and you get rid of the account by crediting accounts receivable. This is the journal entry to write off Lions account. I should probably be more careful here. I should credit accounts receivable Lions to let us know which account receivable it is. So there we go. We've finished 8-9A. Any questions on exercise 8-9A? We're going to get more practice with aging schedule and percentage of sales as we keep doing these problems. No questions? I don't think I've seen anything in the chat. All right. What's the next one? Let's do 8-12A. What we're doing here, dang it, stupid chat. What we're doing in 8-12A is we're just calculating the interest on a note as well as the maturity date. So determine the maturity date and compute the interest for each of the following notes. So there are 5 different independent notes here. Each note is obviously independent of the other ones. 8-12A, part A. All right, notice that these notes, the term is in days. So the first note, the company, the lender, lended $12,000 to the borrower on August 5th. The maturity, the term of the note is 120 days from August 5th. And the interest rate is 9%. The 9%, these interest rates given, those are all annual interest rates. Interest rate is always annual unless stated otherwise. Just assume it's annual. So this 9% is the interest rate they would get on the $12,000 if it was a 1-year note. But it's not a 1-year note, it's a 120-day note. All right, so the first thing we have to figure out is the maturity date. And then the second thing is the dollar amount of interest that the company is going to get, that the lender is going to receive from the borrower when the borrower pays the lender. So what's August 5th plus 120 days, essentially? And so to do these sorts of problems, let's write down a little helpful, it's not an acronym, it's kind of a saying. So you have to know how many days each month has in a year. So there's this acronym, or there's this saying, 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. That helps you. It rhymes, and a rhyme usually helps. So these 4 months have 30 days. 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. So that's the saying, which means the other months, except for February, have 31 days. So if that's saying, hopefully this saying right here can help you remember. And so we have to figure out from August 5th, how many days, what date will be 120 days from now. So August has 31 days. So we do 31 minus 5. That's how many days left in August. So that's 26. September is the next month. 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. So there's 30 in September. October is the next month. It's not February, and it's not one of these months, so it has 31 days. We just got to get 120 days. We still don't have 120, right? We got 61 here, plus 26 there, it's 87. So we still need, what's 120 minus 87? We still need 33 days. November has 31. So now we only need 2 more days, right? That should total up to 118. And we need 2 more days. So December 2nd. That totals up to 120 days. So the maturity date of this note is December 2nd. And the interest that the lender is going to get from the borrower on December 2nd is the interest rate, which is what, 9%, times the principal. Or maybe I should do it this way. I mean, it's the same answer, but I should put the principal first. So the principal times the 9% times, now we convert 120 divided by how many days in a year? And what you're going to assume, there are 365 in a year, but for interest calculations, we assume 360. So if you read the chapter.
November has.
Oh yeah, you're right. Thank you for posting that out. You're right. Thank you. That's correct. November is one of these months, right? 30 days have September, April, June, and November. There we go. And so the maturity date then is December 3rd, not December 2nd. There we go. Thank you very much for pointing that out. I was just kind of going ahead and not thinking. The interest is this calculation though. It's principal times the annual rate times the portion of the year that we're dealing with, and it's 120 over 360. So we assume for interest calculations that there are 360 days in a year. Whenever we're dealing with notes where the term is given to you in days, we assume that there are 360 days in a year. So if you read chapter 8, you'll see that in the book. And so the interest for this note, so the lender will receive the $12,000 on December 3rd, plus interest they'll receive $360. So here's the interest the lender gets, and here's the maturity date. Part B. Notes May 10th, and it's a 90-day note. So let's see if we can do this right. How many days are left in May? May is one of those months with 31 days. So 31 minus 10 is 21. June, 30 days, hath September, April, June, and November. June has 30. Again, we're trying to get 90 days. July has 31. So the sum of those three numbers is 82. So we need 8 more days. So August 8th is the maturity date. And the interest is the principal, 33,600 right here, times the 0.07 times 90 divided by 360. All right, I hear noise in somebody's mic. Could you mute your mic, please? Thank you. I heard some music or something. All righty. $588. Did I use the right interest rate? Yeah. And so forth. Part C, October 20th, and it's a 45-day note. October has 31 days. So 31 minus 20, there's 11 days left in October. November has 30 days. So that totals up to be 41, and we need 4 more days. So it looks like December 4th is the maturity date of this 45-day note. And the interest is the principal, which is $48,000 multiplied by the annual interest rate multiplied by 45 over 360. I believe in the homework, when you're doing the homework for chapter 8, they assume that there are 365 days in a year when they're doing these calculations, but they tell you that. They tell you that. And so then you would be dividing by 365 here, not 360. Why do accountants assume 360 in these sorts of calculations? Just because 360 is an even number, 365 is an odd number, and you're more likely to get a nice whole number as an answer, just for ease of calculation. But it probably isn't as accurate because there's 5 days that you're missing here. So I guess what I'm saying is for our class, assume 360 days in a year when you're doing these calculations. But in the real world, they would probably try to be perfectly accurate. They would assume 365. 720 is the answer. Notice our answers are nice, even numbers. If we assume 365, it's going to be some weird number. Here, I'll tell you what it would be if you assume 365. It would be, for this one, $710.13. And that's rounded to 2 decimal places. So it'd be some weird numbers. That's why we're assuming 360, just to keep the calculations as non-messy as possible. The fourth note, July 16th. I think you guys got this now. So how many days left in July? July has 31. 31 minus 16 is what, 15? Then we have August, which has 31 days. We have September, which is 30 days. And how many days is this note? It's 60. Oh, so we don't need to go that far. 31 and 15 is already 46. So we need 14 days in September to get to 60, right? So that's 60 days. So September 14th is the maturity date, interest rate, or interest, dollars and interest is the $9,000 principal times the annual interest rate of 10%, but it's only a 60-day note, so we got to multiply by 60 days over 360 days. And you get, doing it really quickly here, $150. And finally, the last one, September 15th. And how many days is it? It's 75 days. So September has 30 days, so 30 minus 15, there's 15 days left in September. October is 31. November has 30. Have we gone too far though? 31 and 30 is 61, and 61 and 15 is 76. Gone one day too far. It's only a 75-day note. So I believe 15, 31, and 29 adds up to 75. And so the maturity date is November 29th. On November 29th, the lender will receive a check from the borrower for the principal plus the interest. The interest is the principal times the annual rate times 75 over 360. What was the rate? 7%. So the interest would be right. This one actually, I got a weird number. Just round to the nearest dollar. It's 277. 0.083333, but so there we go. Any questions on this exercise? Exercise 8, 12A. All right, no one has a question. So moving along, let's do 14A. So this is the next one we'll do. I don't think we'll get through all of these, but we'll get through as many as we can. Let's see. Well, this is a good one because this tests your knowledge of the allowance method versus the direct write-off method. Direct write-off method is in the appendix to chapter 8, and you're responsible for it. But it's really simple, so we will, I'm just gonna minimize the chat for a second. All right. On March 10th, May Incorporated, well, that's a little confusing, declared a $2,500 account receivable from Anders Company as uncollectible, and they wrote off the account. On November 18th, May Incorporated received an $800 payment from Anders Company to pay for part of the account that they owed. But May had already wrote it off, the whole account, as uncollectible. All right. So in part A, it says, assume that May uses the allowance method of handling credit losses. Prepare the journal entries to record the write-off and the subsequent recovery of Anders' account. All right, so let's do that. Under the allowance method, when you write off an account, let's see, when did they write it off? On March 10th. So on March 10th, you get rid of the allowance and you get rid of the account, right? We've done this already in a previous one today. So we debit allowance for doubtful accounts and we credit accounts receivable. And this is Anders Company's account receivable. For how much? $2,500. All right. We also need to make the journal entry, it says here, for the subsequent recovery. How much did we recover? We recovered $800 on November 18th. Under the allowance method, when we receive payment from a customer whose account we previously wrote off, we have to make 2 journal entries. One journal entry sort of undoes this journal entry, undoes a portion of this journal entry. And the other journal entry reflects the fact that we received the cash from them. So we would reestablish or reinstate $800 of their account receivable by debiting accounts receivable for $800. We would also reinstate $800 into the allowance account, credit allowance for doubtful accounts for $800. And then we just received $800 from Anders to pay off $800 of their account. So we would also debit cash $800 and credit accounts receivable Anders for $800. Obviously, the net effect of these two journal entries on accounts receivable is no effect. We debited accounts receivable Anders $800. We credited accounts receivable Anders $800. No effect, no net effect on accounts receivable. But there is a net effect on the allowance account. We increased the allowance account by $800, and it stays like that. So that's part A. Try part B. What if we use the direct write-off method? Assume that May uses the direct write-off method of handling credit losses. Do the same thing as you did in part A, but assume they use the direct write-off method. All right, when you write off an account under the direct write-off method, so on March 10th, May Company is writing off the Anders $2,500 account. There is no allowance for doubtful accounts when you use the direct write-off method. You just wait. You don't ever make an estimate of credit allowances. You just wait until account is uncollectible and then you write it off. And this is the way you write it off. You credit the account receivable, just like you would do under the allowance method. But you don't debit allowance for doubtful accounts because there is no allowance for doubtful accounts. You debit bad debt expense. Under the direct write-off method, you never recognize bad debt expense until you know for sure you can't collect an account, in which case you make this journal entry. And then on 11/18, whenever we receive $800 from Anders, we have to make two journal entries. We have to undo a portion of this journal entry by debiting accounts receivable Anders for $800, credit bad debt expense $800, and we also have to do the entry to recognize that we received $800 from Anders and their account receivable goes back down by $800 with a credit. So these are the journal entries when we write off the account and when we collect a portion of the account that we previously wrote off under the direct write-off method. Notice the only difference it really is under the direct write-off method, we have bad debt expense here and here, here, right here, and here. And under the allowance method, we have the allowance for doubtful accounts here and right here. Everything else is the same. Part C. Assume that the payment from Anders arrives on the following February rather than on November 18th of the current year. So repeat part A, that's number 1. Repeat part B, that's number 2. Following February. So 2/5 of the next year. As far as I know, okay, we've already done this entry. It's just now instead of receiving the $800 from Anders on the 18th of November this year, we receive the $800 from Anders on February 5th of the following year. So I mean, this is kind of redundant. You would just do these entries on February 5th of the following year. I don't need to write them again. I'm just copy and paste. You don't do anything different in terms of the journal entries. You just make them on the date that it happens, February 5th. So that's the allowance method. And then the direct write-off method, you would make these entries. Instead of on November 18th of this year, you would just make these same entries on February 5th of the following year. Pretty straightforward. Let me check the answer key real quickly and make sure I'm not leading you astray. Yeah, I think that's right. There we go. Any questions on exercise 814? Trying to bring up the chat again to see if there's anything. All right. All right, let's move on to the next one. So problem 8.2a. Chapter 8, I feel, is the easiest of the 4 chapters on exam 2. It's got several things in it, but they're all very straightforward. At the beginning of the year, Portal Company had the following account on its books. So accounts receivable has a balance of 140 debit balance, and the allowance for doubtful accounts has a credit balance of 8,000, of course. During the year, credit sales were 1.173 million, and collections on account were 1.175 million. The following transactions, among others, occurred during the year. Part A, prepare the journal entries to record credit sales. Here's credit sales. And the collections on account. Here's the collections on account. And the preceding transactions and adjustment and all these. So we need to make a journal entry for the credit sales, for the collections on account, and for all these. So let's make some journal entries. We know they use the allowance method, not the direct write-off method, because they have an allowance for doubtful accounts account, right? Under the direct write-off method, you don't have that account. So they use the allowance method. Let's make a journal entry for the credit sales. You just debit accounts receivable for the 1,173,000, and you credit sales revenue. Collections on account were 1.175 million. What's the journal entry? So this, maybe I should have a little to record credit sales, a description of each. That's that one. The collections, debit cash, and get rid of the accounts receivable that you just collected. So credit accounts receivable. Or they said $1,175,000. So to record collections on account. So that takes care of those two. Now we need to make a journal entry for February 17th, and then May 28th, and so forth. February 17th. We write off R. Lowell's account, 4,000. We know the entry for writing off an account. We write off the allowance by debiting the allowance. And we write off the account by crediting accounts receivable. And it's, whose accounts receivable is it? R. Lowell. I heard a little chime. Does that mean there's a question? Let's see. No? All right. That's February 17th. May 28th, write off G. Boyd's account. Well, 528, it's going to be just the same entry as the one above, only it's going to be G. Boyd for a different amount. So I'm just going to copy and paste to make this faster. The amount was G. Boyd, 3,400. And it's G. Boyd, not R. Lowell. $3,400. Next journal entry, October 13th, received 600 from G. Boyd, who was in bankruptcy proceedings. So G. Boyd filed for bankruptcy. The bankruptcy court, the judge decided to tell G. Boyd, the judge made G. Boyd pay 600 of the 3,400 that they owe to Portal Company. So Portal just got 600 on this account that they previously wrote off. This amount is not included in the 1.175 million of collections. So what's the date again? October 13th. So when you receive part of an account that was previously, when you collect an account that was previously written off or a part of it, you have to make 2 journal entries. So one journal entry will undo, a portion of this. So debit accounts receivable, G. Boyd, $600. Credit the allowance for doubtful accounts. So reinstate the account and reinstate the allowance. And then the other journal entry is to record the cash. So debit cash, $600, because they gave us 600. And then credit accounts receivable, G. Boyd. Whatever. I think I put the dash in a different spot. Fine. Whoops, I've already done that. So these are the 2 journal entries, this one and this one. All right. And then December 15th, write off K. Marshall's account, 1,600. Let's set up a new page. 12/15, write off K. Marshall's account. Just like we did before, we get rid of the allowance, get rid of the account. K. Marshall for 1,600. And then on December 31st, we make the adjusting entry to record our estimate of the amount of credit sales we won't collect this year. There's a question. Let's see what the question is. Can I see the October 13th journal entry really quickly again? Yes, let me go back. Thanks for the question, Claire. I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast. There we go. October 13th, there are 2 journal entries. It's not 1, it's 2. You got to reinstate the G. Boyd account, reinstate the portion of the G. Boyd account that they're paying back. And then you're welcome. And then show that they received the cash from G. Boyd and then take the account receivable off again. So the net effect on account receivable G. Boyd is no effect, right? We debited it for 600, we credit for 600. But the net effect on the allowance for doubtful accounts is it goes up by 600. We made 1 credit and we didn't make any more debits to the allowance account. Don't forget that. When you reinstate an account you previously wrote off, that always increases the allowance for doubtful accounts. That's the net effect. The net effect on accounts receivable is nothing. Nothing happens. It goes up, then it goes down. You're welcome, Claire. All right, 12/15, we did that one, and then now we're to the 12/31 journal entry. So we're using the percent of sales approach, right? Because it gives us the percent of sales. We're not using an aging schedule. There's no aging schedule here. I don't see any aging schedule. So we're going to be using this percent of sales. So what were our credit sales for the year? Right here, 1.173 million. We expect that 0.9% of those will not be collected. And so our adjusting entry, debit bad debt expense, credit allowance for doubtful accounts. For how much? For the 0.9% of our credit collections. I'm going to put a star. The star is 0. It's 0.9%. So what is that? It's not 0.09, it's 0.009 times $1,173,000 of credit sales this year. I think I said collections earlier. We take credit sales, not collections. Credit sales times the 0.9%. Collections we already collected. We know those are collected. We're trying to estimate of our credit sales how much we expect not to be able to collect. Where'd my calculator go? Let's do this calculation. 0.009 times 1,173,000 equals. So we expect to not be able to collect $10,557 of our credit sales that we made this year. So we add to the balance in the allowance account 10,557 with a credit. So that finishes A. We've done all the journal entries. B, show how accounts receivable and the allowance for doubtful accounts will appear on this year's balance sheet. B, well, it helps to make a T account for accounts receivable and a T account for the allowance, because we need to know their ending balances so we can make the balance sheet. And we had lots of transactions happen in these two accounts this year. So we can track those transactions and find the ending balance if we have T account. So let's see, what was the starting balance in accounts receivable? I believe it gave that to us right here, 140,000 starting balance. And then all this stuff happened. So what's the ending balance in accounts receivable? Well, let's see. In this first journal entry, we debited accounts receivable for 1.173 million. So let's go do that in the T account. And then in this entry, this second entry here, we credited accounts receivable for the collections, 1.175 million. And then we, February 17th, we wrote off our Lowell's account, 4,000, the credit. And what else did we do? May 28th, we wrote off G. Boyd's account, 3,400. Then October 13th, we reinstated Boyd's account for 600 with a debit to accounts receivable. But then we credited accounts receivable for 600. So that's a net effect is nothing. But I can go ahead and make both, that's fine. And then what did we do? We, on December 15th, we wrote off K. Marshall's account. And finally, and that's it. That's all we did in accounts receivable. So we need to get the ending balance. So the ending balance is 1,440,000 plus 1,173,000 minus 1,175,000 minus 4,000 minus 3,400 plus 600 minus 600 minus 1,600. $129,000. Now what about the allowance account? The allowance account starts the year with an $8,000 credit balance right here, you see? So let's go do the same thing in the allowance account. What happened in the allowance account? On February 17th, we decreased the allowance account by $4,000 because we wrote off an account. Then on May 28th, we decreased the allowance account by $3,400 right here. And then on October 13th, we increased the allowance account by $600 for G. Boyd to reinstate G. Boyd's account. And then on December 15th, we wrote off K. Marshall's account. So we wrote off the $1,600 of the allowance as well. And then on December 31st, we made our estimate of the amount of the dollar amount that we won't be able to collect from this year's credit sales. So that increases our allowance by $10,557. And so at the end of the year, the balance in our allowance account, which should be a credit balance, it has a normal credit balance, is $8,000 minus $4,000 minus $3,400 plus $600 minus $1,600 plus $10,557, $10,157. If I did the math wrong, correct me. I think that's right. And then finally, to answer the question, what does the accounts receivable look like on the balance sheet? So the 12/31 balance sheet. The accounts receivable would look, you would report accounts receivable at its balance. I want to put it over here, 129,000. And then you would say less the balance in the allowance account. And the balance in the allowance account is 10,157. Again, we don't need the parentheses around the 10,157 to indicate a minus because we have the word less here. That would be redundant. If we don't have the word less to indicate minus, we put parentheses. But we do have the word less. So 120 minus 10,157, 129 minus 10,157 is 118,843. And that is the net accounts receivable. So that does part B. This is part B. This is the answer. We had to do the T accounts though to get the, this number, which is here, and this number, which is here. All right, that's that problem. Any questions on this problem? Problem 8, 2A. Nothing? All right. Let's do, well, we have 1 minute left. I guess let's do 8.3A. And then we'll call it a day. We have a question. Yes. Okay. So one of the students, before we do, I guess we'll be done for the day because it's 1:05. The answers though to all of these questions right here, including the ones we did, if you're still looking at my screen, which I'm sharing, we did all these today. We didn't do 8, 3A, 5A, 6A, and 9A problems. The answers to all of them though are on Blackboard. A student asked earlier at the beginning, and I told them to defer their question to the end. So they asked about the test. Let me go back in the chat and see exactly what did you ask. You asked, have we talked about how we will take the test? Yeah, the test is on My Business Course. So where you do your online homework. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I don't need to. So the test is on My Business Course where you do your online homework. And you'll just, it's on Wednesday, April 1st. So that's next Wednesday. And you have a time frame, 11:40 a.m. to 2:40 p.m. And you just go on My Business Course. You click on the exam. It says exam 2. You should see it already there on your My Business Course. You can't take it yet because the time hasn't come yet. It's next Wednesday, April 1st. And you click on it, and you have 85 minutes to take it. So that means you have to start taking the exam no later than 1:15 p.m. if you want to have the full 85 minutes. Because at 2:40, it just cuts off. Whatever you have done, it submits it. So if you started the exam at 2:30, you would have 10 minutes to finish. So you have a time frame of 11:40 a.m. to 2:40 p.m. You have 85 minutes to take the exam from the time you started. It cuts off at 2:40 and submits whatever you have done. So hopefully that's clear. If next Wednesday, April 1st, if that time frame doesn't fit you, a lot of students have emailed me and said that that didn't fit them. So I let them take the exam next Tuesday, March 31st, at our originally scheduled time. Or I bump them to Thursday during class time. So I have a few students doing that, not too many. So let me know if next Wednesday doesn't fit you. The reason I moved the test to next Wednesday instead of next Tuesday is because I have a lot of students who would have 3 exams on next Tuesday. So that's why I moved it for everyone. But if that time doesn't fit you, you can take it earlier or later. You can either take it Tuesday during our normal time, or you can take it Thursday during our normal class time. Did that answer your question? Are there any other questions in regards to anything? Anything at all? Tomorrow we're going to have the review session at 1 p.m. I'll send you the Zoom link later today via email. Try to study some, and I wonder if we should have it. I don't want to have the review session too early so you guys don't have time to study before the review session, because that's when you have your questions answered. But I don't want to have it too late either. Otherwise, you won't be able to continue to study based on the review session. So I'm going to do one tomorrow. Hopefully that's a good time. I'll post the review session online because I'm going to record it. It'll be on Blackboard. If you need any other extra help or you have any other extra questions after the review session that aren't answered, or between now and the exam, you can email me and we can set up a Zoom time. We can meet one-on-one. I've done this with several students. We can set up a Zoom time. You can pick the time. I'm very flexible. It could be on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. You pick the time and we will meet. I can help you with any questions you have. We can do homework problems. We can do anything. So if there aren't any other questions, that will be it for the day. Anything else? All righty. Good luck you all studying, and I'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m.